if you've been following college football for a while now, you have been waiting for this moment or fearing it for a very long time. But it's finally time to say it. Texas is back. They just took down Alabama in Tuscaloosa in week 2, and oh my goodness. The Crimson Tide, they didn't show up. I mean, they had a big home game. This was the game you circle on the calendar all year long, all off season long, and they came out flat. Obviously, they don't have Bryce Young. You don't have Gibbs anymore. Their Will Anderson. This is a young Alabama team. This is a growing Alabama team. You had quarterback Jalen Milroe. He did not show up as well. He did not perform the way that they expected him to. And Texas, kind of a little more of a veteran squad in terms of their stars, their defense, my goodness, against Alabama, holding them to 24 points. Quinn Ewers and Xavier Worthy still have that same connection that we had dreamed of when you thought about the Texas Longhorns before, and they showed out. And they got the job done against the Crimson Tide, against Alabama. And now, they were ranked 11 before this game, number 11 Texas taking down number 3 Alabama. Texas, when you kind of break down the top 4, Texas has to be in there. Right now it looks like Georgia, you got Michigan, Florida State. I mean, they have performed as well. And Texas has the best win out of anybody's year. This is the best win that you can possibly come up with. Texas taking down Alabama in Tuscaloosa to start out the year, really. Yes, they didn't show too much against Rice. If you just go by resume, then Texas, you could argue they're the number 1 team in the country based on this win, especially, where they were ranked before and what they're going to do going forward. It's going to be tough to deny that Texas deserves that top spot, deserves that number 1 team in the nation, as that ranking. But let's just take a look at Alabama before we take a look at Texas, right? Because what just happened? Alabama is always expected to be Alabama. Nick Saban is Nick Saban. They still have all these great recruits. McClellan looked great at running back. They have a star there. But Alabama, they just did not show enough offensively. Defensively, they did what they had to do, up front. Their secondary committed too many penalties. Their penalties destroyed them in that game against the Texas Longhorns. And you really just have to circle one guy. And given the quarterback history that Alabama has had over the past few years, when it comes to Bryce Young, when it comes to Tua Tagovailoa, they've had reliable quarterback play. And really, Jalen Milroe, he made a phenomenal throw to put Alabama up 16-13, I believe it was. It was a great deep bomb, one of the greatest throws you'll see all year. But after that, tough decision-making, early interception in the first quarter kind of, hurt Alabama early in the game. You had that late interception as well. Milroe, young quarterback, needs more experience, but he was relied upon to take down Texas. And this Texas team with Steve Sarkisian has been developing. They've been growing. They've been waiting for their moment to strike to get a big win like this, especially as they continue to move to the SEC next year. We're going to see this matchup a lot more often. It's going to be really exciting. But Alabama, to me, this game felt more... I know that the Russell Westbrook thing, where you say, did the Jazz lose this game or did the Thunder win it, or the other way around? Who won and who lost this game? To me, yes, Texas played great. They put up 34 points on the road in Tuscaloosa. The offense showed up. But Alabama had so many opportunities to put the foot on the necks of Texas, especially when they're up 16-13. You get a stop and a score, you probably win that game, right? So Texas, again, great for them to respond, and even when they got a big interception and they ended up scoring, the Alabama came right back and scored, and that would be the end of their scoring efforts. But Alabama offensively just did not click. They didn't have it going for them. Jalen Milroe, again, I think he's a good quarterback in terms of what Alabama needs him to be. His mobility showed out great, and he saved a lot of good third downs. A number of good, there was one play that didn't matter at the end of it, but that kept Alabama alive, that showed, okay, Milroe knows how to step up in the pocket, knows how to make things happen, and can really just change the game with his, he's huge, and he's physical, and he can move. There was one play, it was about to be a 7-yard sack, and he ends up, finding his way through the pocket. Yes, the play, there were like 7 Longhorns just through. The offensive line didn't hold them at all. And Jalen Milroe found a way to just move up enough to avoid what would have been a 7-yard sack and make it a 1-yard sack. To make it, I believe it was 2nd and 11. That showed, okay, this guy there's something there with Jalen Milroe. to where I think he can be the Alabama quarterback, and you can win with Jalen Milroe, right? Obviously, you didn't end up beating Texas. So for Alabama, their secondary committed too many penalties. Jalen Milroe still needs a ton of work, and this offense needs to click a lot better. They got a huge offensive line. They're still Alabama. This might be the final time they lose again this season. Now, I'm just kind of taking a look at the schedule right now. You got a big tune-up game against USF. Okay, that's going to be, you have to figure out a way to not just win that. I mean, they're going to win the game. Okay, they're going to beat South Florida, but they have to blow out South Florida by a lot if they want to kind of get things going back again. Mississippi, they got Ole Miss, they got Mississippi State. They got the SEC schedule coming up. I mean, if things continue to go, if the Alabama team that we just saw shows out, and that's the squad that we witnessed against Tennessee, against LSU, even against a team like Arkansas. They're not as good this year as they were last year, but A&M, they just got defeated by Miami. I don't think they're going to be much of an issue at all. They'll be unranked after this poll comes out tomorrow. But Alabama, this could be a 2 to 3 loss Alabama year. A big loss against Texas. This is not Alabama of old. The Alabama dynasty, especially with NIL, kind of hurting the program, right? Because right now, recruiting isn't about, okay, you go to the best coach, right? You go to the best team. You go to the best program, right? You put yourself in a position to succeed now. You go to the program that gives you the best position to make a lot of money. And also you have to factor in program success, a great coach, the future of the team, the facilities. But there's this added NIL factor, and Alabama hasn't really focused as much on that. Obviously, they're Alabama. The brand is the brand. They get all the recruits. But when it comes to Georgia, when it comes to Texas, right? How did they get Quinn Ewers on this squad? NIL, that's what did it. Why did he leave Ohio State? We all know why. Why did Arch Manning come here? We all know why. So Texas, now moving to the SEC, capitalizing on NIL. Oklahoma's going to have to do that as well when they get moving to the SEC. Now you see this win, and Texas can use this win in recruiting forever. But for Alabama, they might have a 3-loss season. They might not even make the SEC championship game. It's going to be tough for them to recover from this loss. But, I mean, if Alabama goes on, this is their only loss, and Texas stays good, they'll be just fine. They will be just fine. They'll have a chance to to go out and beat Georgia in the SEC championship game, although I don't think they will. I think Georgia's going to probably three-peat this year. Unless if Texas, moving on to them, kind of comes out and comes out strong. But I kind of want to go back to the game. Right now that we're on Texas, Alabama, right, they did not perform. They didn't show out. We all know that. But this Texas offense, to me, right, they felt opportunistic. They didn't feel like they dominated against Alabama. Yes, you look at the score, 34-24, and they felt in control of the game, even when they were down by 3. They felt in control, but this offense did not feel like it could score at will, right? When you look at a team that could win a national championship with their offense, they're teams that could score at will, right? You look at those the Georgia teams sometimes. They scored at will against TCU, right? So these Texas players, right? Again, they did what they had to do. Okay, it felt like, again, I'm going back to the whole Alabama didn't show up. That's more why Texas won this football game. Obviously, I want to give Texas a ton of credit. I know I went on TikTok and I said Texas is back, and I'm just going to announce that as long as I can until it fails, because this is still Texas to me, right? It feels, yes, and I think even everyone is hesitating to say Texas is back. I'm going to say it because I do think Texas really is back to being a reliable program, a dominant program. Maybe not this year in terms of competing for a national championship, but there's a reason they're in the SEC. They have capitalized so much on NIL. Steve Sarkisian has really been a phenomenal head coach for this team. First assistant to beat Nick Saban as a head coach as well. I mean, that's a huge milestone. Texas has the brand. They've got a quarterback coming up. They've got a quarterback right now. They've been able to get great receivers, great players, and everything. This is Texas. This is the Texas that Texas wanted to be. And now you look at this team 5 years. I mean, they've been building a young roster. They've been getting great recruiting classes. And now they're showing they can develop these players. It's going to be interesting to see what happens after the Quinn Ewers, what happens after the Arch Manning era. But for now, Texas is in a position where they can really compete for a national championship starting right now this year, because this year kind of feels a little bit up in the air. Yes, you have Georgia. Yes, you have Michigan. But there's no longer, especially after today, there's no longer that, oh, Alabama's just going to go out and win. Oh, Alabama's just going to go get it done. There's no more of that now. Now that Texas has shown that Bama is beatable. Bama's beatable. Now you need to show that Georgia's beatable. Now you need to show that Michigan's beatable, Ohio State. Those are all going to be competing programs. But Texas, again, you've got to break down their schedule because Texas has they haven't done this before. They haven't beaten Bama before. But you look at some of the past years, they'll start out strong. And they've got Wyoming next Saturday. That's not going to be a problem. They take on Baylor on the road in Waco. They've been interesting. They hung on against Utah, but they weren't able to beat Texas State. Sure. I don't understand Baylor this year. We don't have a good read on them. Kansas is Kansas. And then you go to the Red River rivalry on October 7th, and that's going to be a huge game for both teams. Oklahoma looked all right against SMU. They looked okay. They didn't look like they could beat Alabama at all. They did not look like at all that they could be. I think the gap between Texas and Oklahoma showed last night, right? Because when you look towards the SEC, Oklahoma, when that move was first announced, Oklahoma looked to be in a better position. Now, you got this win, better non-conference Texas has as well. They are in such a better position than Oklahoma is right now. So it's going to be interesting. That game is really, it's the last game that those two teams will play in the Big 12. It's the last Big 12 Red River. And that is going to probably determine who's going to dominate in terms of the SEC for the next decade plus. Because, I think Oklahoma's still going to be good. They'll be fine in the SEC. They're not going to be a national championship contender, for the next couple of years. I mean, they've got a new head coach as well, and Brent Venables. Sarkisian's been there a little bit longer than Venables. So if Oklahoma can find a way to win that game and disrupt Texas this season, that'll probably be the most Oklahoma thing I've ever heard of. But then you go to Houston. I mean, Houston just lost to, I believe it was Rice, who Texas blew out. So that's not going to be a problem. BYU, we don't really know how good BYU is this year compared to last year. They don't seem like the BYU of Jaron Hall and Zach Wilson, even though they moved to the Big 12. The Kansas State game's always going to be tough, but they get the blessing of it being at home on the road against TCU. TCU lost their entire roster last year. I'm not really worried about TCU this year for Texas, Iowa State, and Texas Tech, and that'll round out the year. In terms of games that Texas can lose right now, you look at Oklahoma, you look at Kansas State, and to me, at least if that Texas team that we saw last night shows up game after game, there's only two losable games on this schedule for the Longhorns. That's Oklahoma, and that's Kansas State. And they get the blessing, I believe, of Kansas State, and that's at home. So they get Kansas State at home, they get Oklahoma at home in Dallas in the Cotton Bowl, and that's kind of it. Now, again, this is Texas. So that road Iowa State game is going to be tough. Texas Tech showed out well against Oregon. Maybe they'll be good, right? TCU can always be TCU and be funny. So Texas, yes, I think they have a great chance of winning of putting themselves. They do have a great chance of winning a national championship this year. Texas is a title contender. Texas is back if they can win the games that they know they can win. A one-loss Texas probably gets in if they win the Big 12, right? And this would put them in a great position when you talk about the SEC and where they're going to go going forward. But Texas, they have a chance to do something that nobody expected they could do. Quinn Ewers has such a great chance, and Xavier Worthy, they have such great chances to raise their draft stock. And here's the thing. When you break it down, Texas, if they go undefeated, I mean, they're going to be the number one team in the country. Unless, Georgia may beat Alabama in the championship game if they get that far. Georgia's going to have a lot of great wins, but who knows how far they go. Again, it's still early. Texas could lose to Wyoming next week. You never know. Things can happen. College football is weird. College football is funny. But right now, it's shaping up to be that we kind of can tell who the top four is going to look like. We're seeing Georgia. The Big Ten is going to be Michigan or Ohio State. Obviously, we all know that. Sorry, Penn State fans, but it's just the same thing year after year when it comes to Penn State and Ohio State and Michigan. It's just that big three, but it's really a big two. So you look at the Big Ten winner, Michigan, Ohio State. SEC is probably going to be Georgia, unless if LSU or Tennessee maybe shows out. I can see LSU making a run, but that wouldn't take down Georgia. That wouldn't take off Georgia from being a top four team, unless if you got a lot of undefeated squads out there, right? You look at the Pac-12, though. Maybe you've got USC coming out strong. Maybe Caleb Williams finds a way to get that team undefeated and win the Pac-12 again. But I think right now, when you look at it, especially with non-conference, Georgia, I'm going to go Michigan, Texas, Florida State. Right now, that's got to be the top 4. That's got to be the top 4. Big Ten in Michigan, Ohio State, Georgia, Texas, Florida State. That's got to be your top. If I could say what the top 4 is going to be, what I just said, that's going to be it. And I'm pretty confident in that, especially with the way Clemson has played, right? Now, looking at the ACC, though, you could see Florida State maybe have to deal with the schedule issues, but they've got the win against LSU, so it doesn't matter. They've got the big non-conference win, right? USC doesn't have that. Utah doesn't really, beating Baylor isn't really that. Texas has an Alabama win. Florida State has an LSU win. So even LSU, right, now that they've got a loss, they're not going undefeated anymore. That was a huge game. But for Texas, going back to them, this is just, if there's a year, if it doesn't feel make or break, but if there's a year where Texas fans can kind of hang their cowboy hats and say, Texas is back, folks, this is the year. They are now in a position to where they can put themselves in the college football playoff, in the Final Four-team college football playoff, before they head to the SEC. Imagine the momentum that you get in recruiting. I'm not saying they have to go win a national championship. I'm not going to sit there and, the Texas has to win it all, because I don't think they stand a chance against Georgia, just like Alabama wouldn't stand a chance against Georgia, just like really nobody stands a chance beside, obviously, Ohio State last year. They almost won that game. People like to forget that. But I don't think Ohio State's as good. I think Michigan's a little better than Ohio State this year, but again, college football will be college football. But Texas, again, you talk about that momentum they have and what they can do. And I'm not going to sit here and say they can get above Alabama, but Nick Saban's not getting any younger. Steve Sarkisian isn't that old. If you could ask somebody, right, in 10 years, who's better positioned for the next 10 years as a program, especially after this game, obviously recency bias is recency bias, but it really looks like Texas right now is in a better position as a program. Texas, they've gotten better quarterbacks. They've gotten great receivers. They've been able to do great in recruiting. I think Georgia, obviously Georgia, back-to-back national championships, they're in the best position of any program in the nation. But Texas and Alabama are on such a level playing field now. They're in the SEC, or about to be. And if Texas keeps beating Alabama in SEC play going forward, we might be seeing the fall off of Alabama, especially with Nick Saban. And when he finally decides to, hang up the dry fit shirt, okay, one day Nick Saban will not be at Alabama. Steve Sarkisian will still be there for the foreseeable future, and it's going to be different. But Texas might be going back to the old ways, the old Texas. The horns are going up. And if you're Oklahoma, you got to be scared. If you're in the SEC, you got to be scared, especially after what we saw last night with the Texas Longhorns. But I'm going to say it. Texas is back, folks, and if that blows up in my face, well, you got to remember I'm an Oklahoma fan, so I don't care. Anyway, that is what we do, though, out here on Break Panel Sports. This has been a great breakdown for me. It's been fun. I've enjoyed talking about Texas, even though it hurts me as an OU guy that Texas may just be back, and I'm swallowing my pride when it comes to all of this, because sometimes you got to give credit where credit's due, and they showed up. They really showed up that day. But that'll do it again for Break Panel Sports. It's been a little breakdown of some college football, breakdown of Texas, Alabama last night. It's been fun, and we will see you another time here on Break Panel Sports. Make sure to check us out all on social media and everything. Had some fun TikToks about this game last night. Go check it out. It's been Break Panel Sports. I'll see you. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Break Panel Sports, and we are here in the beautiful backyard of our friend Jeff. But I'm John.
And I'm Joel. Make sure to look for more on our Spotify and YouTube. We'll see you next time.